Chapter 86. Me and Titania shared a stare-off filled with our respective powers clashing in the middle of her throne room. Her gaze was filled with the magical might backed by being a few millennia old and having a connection to the green, the force of plant life in the DC universe. While I met her purely on the might of my spiritual power and weight of my inner world of Heuco Mundo. To put bluntly, we were life forms on completely different levels as my gaze crushed her own intent-filled stare, making a tear of green blood seep out of each of her eyes as I put her in her place. Titania. I have a question. I started as my head tilted to the side. Why do you play this game with someone who is patently more powerful than you and is fully willing to break you in half? Wordlessly, Titania made her tears evaporate as she leaned forward towards me, which exposed a good bit of her large breasts that were loosely held in her Victorian-style dress. Because Jake Barris, I despise being weaker than others. Isn't it obvious? She retorted, snorting, and seeing my face cool from my priorly amused expression, she went silent as God Killer that was strapped to my side flashed some true bloodlust at her, making her swallow. Yeah. That's the thing. You are weak. Fairies themselves that don't bind themselves to higher beings are extraordinarily weak, with even mortal human children being capable of killing them with a tennis racket, but you and Maeve. You both are always trying nonsense to get your world, but for literally thousands of years you have failed. I said with a small hint of mockery in my tone as I pulled back my spiritual energy that smothered her form into her throne. For all that you lived millennia, my handmaiden Astrid, who has served me for less than a couple months, is more powerful than you. Anyway, what was the favor or request that you had for me to receive the invitation to the auction? I said, getting down to business, and Titania's solemn scowl as I put her in her place was erased into nothingness as she smiled, with it being filled with cruelty. Titania just looked down at her nails and didn't meet my eyes as she spoke nonchalantly. Oh, nothing much to you. Just that spawn that is growing within your woman Galatea. I want your firstborn child, of course. Her green eyes snapped up at me with cruelty playing within her eyes as she hissed. The selling of the firstborn child is Fey tradition after all, and you have been trying to get along with the. Before Titania could continue her bullshit, I sped forward in a sonido faster than she could react and backhanded the fuck out of her face so hard that her skull shattered the gem-encrusted throne behind her, while I am just nonchalantly sonidoed back into place, with the interaction taking less than half a second. Oh. Titania, that was a powerful sneeze. I think the smell of your own shit got up into your nose and rotted your brain a bit, making you sneeze. I said genially as I viciously tore aside the Fey laws that tried to bind me for striking the host of the home I was within without due cause. UHG. She groaned as her leaf green eyes rolled around at the sheer whiplash I gave her. So, when is the auction and where is the ticket or invitation to get into there? I tried to offer you a fair deal or favor for allowing me to go with you to the auction, but you are a queen of a supernatural land with none of the power to back up such a claim. I said coldly as Titania's eyes cleared and she realized how fucked she was when I could tear aside the plane's natural laws that bound people to the Fey laws. Granted, my tearing those Fey laws aside left me vulnerable to being attacked by said laws. But when I could tear them aside, there was nothing that people that were weaker than me could do to use those laws to actually hurt or control me. Titania chewed on her lip before she looked over to one of the frozen fairies who had collapsed to the ground under the prior clashing of our magical gazes. Get him the medallion from my parlor, she said deceptively calm before she looked back at me. So, I see you are quite angry. Let me assure you that when I asked for your firstborn, I did not mean to harm it. I truly wished to raise it as my heir and maybe a husband if it was a boy, that would give me an even greater heir in the future, she said completely shamelessly, and I just dully blinked in response as my face remained like granite. Titania didn't bother blathering on as my mind raced on how the hell she knew Galatea was pregnant when she hadn't even said anything to me. But as that fairy rushed over with the medallion that would grant me access to the Fey Market's exclusive auction, I merely plucked it out of the fairy's hands, making her freeze before I looked up to Titania. I see you or any fairy messing with my children, whether it be yours or Maeve's. I will show the lands of fairy the wrath that broke a chaos lord, and you get to survive speaking that prior nonsense due to this medallion. Don't test me, Titania, I am not one of those lesser world lords you can wrap around with your holes. I warned her as I finally left the world with the invitation in hand, and I raced back to my realm to see if Galatea was truly pregnant. Thus, the moment I got home I felt Galatea and Raven both sitting down in the home theater room with Astrid hanging out in one of the room's shadows, so I quickly made my way there as quickly as I could and threw open the doors with a crashing noise. Galatea, you are pregnant. I demanded, and she froze for a moment, and then I froze and collapsed to my knees as Raven dryly spoke. No. Me and Galatea are both pregnant, you fucking dumbass. What, did you think bareback fucking us for several hours a day wouldn't have complications? I made a rattling noise as I died a little inside, with my soul literally shriveling within my humanoid shell.